guys, which occasionally happens with the way I use my tape recorders.
It's a really interesting writer to interpret, actually, because anything's possible.
Right.
And it's almost surreal, borderline. Working on one of his projects, the lines are very kind of finely drawn.
Right.
So it could be ludicrous or it can be credible. And I think that's part of, obviously, the attraction of working on his material, and also how to sort of make the lunatic credible, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's a very specific tone.
It's. I was thinking of Fight Club, and you take the same type of tone that's similar to Fight Club.
Yeah.
And David Fincher just took his visuals and went crazy with them.
Right.
And Clark took a much more basic approach, driven by the script and the characters and the performance.
Yeah.
And still the same humor tone.
Yeah.
And
I think Clark, being an actor, I think went for the character in the piece and for the humanistic moments, which I think is a good thing too, because it softened some of the harsher aspects of the material, which is not lovable. It's far from lovable, and I think that's a fine line between repulsive and something else, and it shouldn't just be repulsive. It has to be thought-provoking, and it has to push the edges, but it can't just be horrible. It can't just be disgusting, even though one is in fact exchanging everything but bodily fluids at the end of this movie.
Well, it's one of Flanagan's trademarks is he has these lines, and I can't believe they said that, but it's hilarious and repulsive at the same time. And that fine line is, and especially with a topic like sex addiction.
Exactly. And you don't want to send people howling from the theater, and on the other hand, you have to negotiate this very dangerous edge of what will make people run from the theater, and what will in some way attract them and lure them and sort of hypnotize them.
I think if you don't have a few people run from the theater with this material, you're doing something wrong.
Right, it's true. You should always expect 5. When it goes past 5, watch out. Yeah.
Have you been with a few screenings where there have been
I was
run-outs
once at a Jodorowsky screening in the 70s in Los Angeles, and it was a film by Jodorowsky, and in the first scene, many frogs dressed as, I think he was making a point about class and principle and so forth, but anyway, he had dressed many frogs up as royalty, king and queen frogs, and frogs in ermine, and frogs in hats and crowns, and then exploded the frogs. For real.
Yeah.
And at this screening, there was a sect of Sikhs who had somehow been invited to this screening, and there must have been about 50 of them, and they trooped in at the beginning of this screening, one by one in their white robes and their tall hats, or those turbans, and their daggers and everything, and they came with wives and children.
Oh my God!
And as one. Sort of midway through this first scene, they all stood up simultaneously as though the word had just gone out. All of them stood out and immediately left the theater. So I think that was one of the finest walkouts I ever saw.
I don't think you can top that.
No, it was great. And this actually came shortly after a speech that he gave in which he dedicated the movie to God.
Okay.
I think that somewhere in there the message has got too mixed for the Sikhs.
Do you want to look at the menu?
I would.
Yeah. Did it take you a while to find a center for Ida, if that's the right word? Or did you find one because she's so many things at once?
She's so many things at once. Mostly it was sort of finding, oh great, thank you.
Yeah, she is many things.
Yeah, and for me, it was finding sort of who Ida was as a young woman, more than anything. Yeah, because afterwards she's, there's the young, vibrant, kind of alive, radical Ida, and then there's the washed out version, and I think the washed out version is like someone took young Ida and put her in bleach, put her in the washing machine and took all the color out of her, and just left this reactionary, fussy, angry shell of a woman. Initially, it seemed to me that Ida was, she was radical. She's, for the part about her mind op, she was a monkey wrench gang, and I think she really thought she was doing the right thing by young Victor.
Really, yeah.
Warning him against other people who might want to take advantage of him. And these are all ways, of course, to hold him closer, ever yet closer to herself. And I think initially her own insecurities force her to kidnap him for a start, and I think insofar as she's revealing herself to him, she's telling him her truth. It doesn't matter really whether or not it's the truth. It's her truth, and I think she really means the best by him. I found her rather sympathetic. I felt like she really feels that it's she and Victor against the world. She's training him to be a stronger, better person. The fact that he's a child and can sort of barely comprehend what she's up to is really, But I know those people too. Those people who treat their children as adults and who sort of expect by way of their connection, of their genetic connection, that the child is going to be able to completely comprehend what the parent is up to, And in many cases they do. There is a sort of inherent understanding between parents who treat their children as adults and as opposed to parents who treat their children as children. Often the child will respond in a very adult way, and I think that's what Victor does, because Victor sort of wants to be, he wants his mother to like him, and to be a good boy. Just, also feels the need to escape. She's completely crackers. It takes him on these rather exciting, terrifying adventures.
Yeah.
And those were so fun to play. There was, unfortunately, a scene that was cut, because again, we were working against the clock on this movie, and it's such a pity because I was, watching all of the ads over the weekend, and it was so great that we were bought by Fox Searchlight. But if only we'd had some of that money to spend on advertising, to get a few more close-ups, because we were so under the gun. And there was one particular scene that Clark wasn't able to use because I think he didn't have the time to get in close-up, and it's where Ida is sort of trailing Victor through the department stores, giving him lectures. There's a woman by the hair coloring counter, and she's picking up the blonde hair dye. And Ida has a lot to say to Victor about, women who aren't able to be themselves, blondes who choose to be blondes, and what all of that means. And the other thing that I wish could have been emphasized more was the fact that she's a glue sniffer, and I don't know whether that really, she inhales. It was a note when I saw the piece, that I felt that that should be more emphasized. That this woman was really she was an addict, and on top of everything.
Right. Yeah. It's
and that's why her brain is rotted sort of before her time.
Yeah.
I've read a few reviews, and I don't think they really got the fact that Ida has actually fried her own brain.
Yeah. It's it was definitely low budget, but I read that you had sometimes the costuming, you brought your own wig sometimes. Is that accurate?
Not just sometimes. I mean, I showed up because nobody talked to me initially about how we were going to do this age change, and I had a wig that I'd had from a show that I did sometime in the 80s, I think. And I said, well, maybe you could use this because I didn't know how they were going to achieve this effect without a wig maker there, So I brought them that wig, and then what to do as a younger person, and I felt that she shouldn't look that much like me, that it should also be kind of a radical departure. And it so happened that the hairdresser in the movie had bought a double wig and a kind of vinyl wig in a like a cheapo wig store somewhere in the Bronx, I think, for my stand-in for the cop scene where I attacked the cop, and I saw it in the makeup room and said, maybe that would be interesting for Ida. Not that it looked in the least bit plausible or real, but because I felt it might be good as part of Ida's disguise.
It could be completely believable that she would not be completely plausible.
Exactly, and also that Ida is constantly in some form of disguise.
Right. Okay. Did you have to sometimes do periods and ages in the same day of shooting?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. And not only that, it was insanely hot.
Oh really?
Oh my God! I remember.
It was New Jersey in the summer.
Stuff. And that bus was that was a bad day. We were pouring sweat. And then in that horrible hospital, which is condemned, the hospital was built, I think, in 1910 or something. It's by the same guys who gave us Ellis Island.
Right, of course, yeah. It felt like Ellis Island.
Same charm.
But it worked great.
Relentless charm, shall I say. It was so horrible, this place. So complex. Victorian red brick vile, and many of the rooms still contained medical files and restraints, and all kinds of crazy stuff could be found all over the hospital, including sort of dump sites of medical supplies and so forth. What was even stranger was that when it would start to get dark, animals would kind of come into the grounds of the hospital, and deer and badgers and raccoons and skunks and stuff, and foxes. There's this weird feeling of nature kind of taking back this place. And one of our producers actually got lost there at night. There were about 7 or 8 buildings, all identical in appearance. A maze of buildings, and we spent like 3 hours trying to get out of the maze, not just out of the building, but out of the parking lots, a maze of buildings one night. It was so horrible and so haunted. I felt really bad for our little PAs. We had these sweet interns who were showing up there at 4 o'clock in the morning to get ready for everybody else. Oh yeah, how can you do it? This place is so spooky and nasty. It was just stank, really horrible. I think they'd used it a lot for episodes of The Sopranos too, for the hospital episodes.
Oh, did they?
Sopranos. So there's a lot of kind of movie refuse too. I should say television, kind of craft services refuse from years before. It was bad.
Did it help your performances at all?
Not at all.
No. Would you rather the stage was repetitive?
Definitely. I mean, I guess it had an aura of authenticity, although Victor is supposed to be keeping his mother in a high rent hospital. This was anything but.
Right.
It was really awful.
Yeah. It only occurred to me today, 'cause I'm a big Grifters fan, that there's a lot of parallels between Ida and Lily, almost more than any other role that you played.
True. I'm very attracted to those roles, I am afraid.
But Lily is much less nice, I guess.
Yes, she is. Lily is, I think, much more. I think Ida, at least, is kind of. She's running amok of the law, but there's a sense of humor where Ida's concerned in the writing and I hope consequently in the playing. Grifters, that poor woman, she was a completely lost cause. She was like a fox that bites off its own leg to leave the trap.
Yeah.
But they are, I think they're cut from the same basic cloth.
Yes. Yeah. They both want to love their sons, but
it's just a little problem.
Able to do it, really.
Problem with their own personality foibles. Yes.
Right. And when I was in Alzheimer's, what was the mental state that you created? Was she always drifting in and out? Did she ever know completely who he was, or?
I played it, and she didn't.
Right.
Because I felt that anything else kind of makes it more confusing. So I chose for her to be finally honest with him. And of course that's what would drive him the craziest. And somebody who you're constantly trying to feed and who constantly refuses to eat. What is the worst thing that they can say to you? I'm hungry. That's what she does to him. She completely bursts his bubble at every single turn. So, any expectation is ruined. So that was really the approach that I took. And in the scenes where his friend Denny, I believe, that Denny is my son, Denny's my son, making it all the more horrible for Victor, who tries so hard to look after me, and tries so hard to be recognized. But all of those hopes are immediately dashed. Right. He doesn't have a chance.
Yeah. These are all characters that are broken, but you also, particularly with the tone of this, you need to make them somewhat lovable.
Yes, but I mean, I don't sort of set out to make them lovable, but I set out to give her a degree of honesty that you can't blame her really.
Humanity,
Yeah, humanity. She's being as clear with him as she knows how. And as an older woman, it's really his own expectations that are getting him into trouble.
I was also with like the Jarlene of it. She's not the greatest mother in the world, but there's a lot of life in her.
Well, I love that character, even though, ultimately I think we got about 3 lines out. That character was a little fleshier too at one point. But the great line of that character, and one that I felt was so wonderful, so indicative of her character, was, the boys say, "Mom, why didn't you go home for Dad's funeral?" She says, "Because I didn't want to."
Right.
And again, that's their expectation. It's like, why didn't you do this for me, for me, for me? And kids are like that. They're always sucking their parents' lifeblood. And this woman actually has the honesty to say, because I didn't want to. You've sucked the life out of me for years, but you're not able to accept that now, at a certain time in my life, where you're adults, and I have a choice, I have a last choice to actually do something under my own steam. And you're telling me that I should be home for Dad's funeral. So I thought I liked her honesty, her forthright character. And, I think often those mothers are the best mothers. Mothers who say, go ahead, leap off the cliff, see what it's like when their kid threatens it, or, try it out. Call their bluff. As opposed to, other mothers who never let their children out of the bag or let them do anything, or mothers that we all think are so great, not necessarily the greatest. I think we're all different. We all have our ways of dealing with things. These just happen to be sort of showier than the rest.
Yeah. It's what you've played quite a few memorable mothers, but they're each different.
I hope so.
Yeah, they're each really different, and
oh my goodness!
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mushrooms.
Great.
Thanks so much. You're great. Thank you.
Thanks.
No, don't worry about it. It's good. Thanks. The danger of being typecasting has to cross your mind, but you definitely choose roles where the mothers are completely different, and you don't think of them as mothers. Oh, she's playing another mother again. I never think of that. I think of them as characters.
I hope. Yeah, I mean, it's a woman's fate, I guess, at a certain age to be cast as a mother and then as a grandmother. But these are all, I think, very interesting people, and that's what I like playing. I like playing character. I'm happy that I'm thought of for those characters. And I've also played the craziest mother but I thought she was a great mother, is Morticia Addams. She's a wonderful mother to play, because everything is, of course, the antithesis of what it should be.
Right. No.
Oh, you're looking so ill, how wonderful. You're so pale.
I was only going to ask one question about Morticia, but since we're on it, could you think of played her straight in her own way? Did you ever go for humor with her, or just take what you thought she was, and the humor would come out of that?
Her husband amuses her no end. Her humor comes from total adoration and appreciation of her children, her husband, and her wonderful place in life. And I actually modeled Morticia Addams on Jerry Hall, my friend, who is the most beneficent, wonderful mother in the world, and has the most beautiful children. And I've never seen Jerry, turn a hair with her children. She's always just fine mother, adoring her children adoring her.
Yep.
I think she was such a good role model for Morticia.
Yeah, I interviewed Jerry when she did The Graduate a few years ago, and I loved her. Actually, I didn't really know anything about her going in, and she talked about her children quite a bit. Had you been familiar with Planiak's work other than Fight Club before getting involved with Choke, or?
Fight Club?
Yeah.
But I can't say I was a big avid Chuck Palahniuk reader.
Right.
But I like his take on things, and he's really an interesting guy. He's a real thinker. And I hate that expression, outside the box, but he's
definitely outside the box. And he came to the set for a while, I imagine. You met him at some point, or?
In the middle of that chocolate exchange.
Really?
Showed up, yes, that day.
Right in the middle of it?
Right in the middle of it. And I said, this must be horrible for you for many reasons. A, you've got to watch the chocolate being exchanged, and B, how weird for you to see your characters suddenly sort of embodied. And he said, no, it was really great for him, and he was really happy, and it all felt very good to him, and that made me feel good.
Yeah. He's got kind of almost a godlike quality with his most ardent fans. When he came onto the set, was there tension amongst the crew and worry at all? Or?
No, he's very quiet, very modest. He moves quietly, he speaks softly. The most the loudest thing about him is his physique, which is very
Right. He's kind of
He's
bulked up,
strong
right, yeah.
and he's worked out, and other than that, you could barely see him. He was very invisible on the set, just what you want. From the writer.
The writer of the original source material.
Yeah.
This is Clark Gregg's. It was his first feature, I think. What was his directing style? Did he allow you guys a lot of leeway, or was he more specific?
Very much an actor's approach.
Right.
Very enthusiastic and happy to be there, which I think all actors who come to direct have that kind of, whoa, look, atmosphere. Was very good on set. Everyone got along well. He was obviously, he'd done his homework because he'd written this thing, written the script, so he knew his intention. He was very receptive, and not, I don't remember many instructions. It was helpful.
Right. How much rehearsal did you have? Very little. Yeah.
No. Maybe an afternoon, a couple of afternoons before we left LA. But none there, really. We just did a camera rehearsal, and went into it. And that was actually sort of quite easy. I think the first scene that I did was the scene with Denny. And once you kind of get your rhythm, and then everything seemed to come pretty naturally after that.
Yeah. I imagine tone would be a difficult thing to set with this, because for everybody, for the entire cast, and were there any parameters you were given in terms of playing, or that you just knew from the material?
I think we were all going for sort of credibility there, and a level of honesty, not to shortchange the material by commenting on it, or making it purposefully funny, or that's sometimes a seductive mistake, to try and make material that's funny, extra funny, or to mess with it. It generally means that the material doesn't stand by itself. And usually if things are funny, they will be funny.
They'll be funny, yeah.
And if they're not funny, they won't. And there's no way to push them unless you happen to be, a brilliant comic like a Will Smith, or or Chris Rock, or a John Belushi. No way you're going to push it into funniness. Situation is either funny or it's not. Same thing with people. They're either funny or they're not. You can't force a square peg into a round hole.
How was Sam to work with? He's one of my favorite actors. And I can't imagine anybody else really doing this role. I'm sure people could, but...
No, he's kind of brilliantly sweet and scatological.
Right, that's great. He can play demented, but he's lovable at the same time while he's saying this stuff,
He's amazingly talented. He's one of the sweetest people I've ever met. He's incredibly accessible, very involved with his work. He would listen to Chuck, and have Chuck reading on tape in his dressing room, which was next door to mine on the 3rd floor or something. And I would, in his time between shots and stuff, that's what he'd do. He sat in his room and listened to the text.
Did he really? Okay. Wow.
And he was, I think, very faithful to his character. As you say, I can't really think of anyone else who would play it.
Right.
I think it was perfect casting.
Yeah, it really was.